I watched my own brother walk out of our family construction company with a smirk on his face, carrying the keys to the business my father and I had built from nothing. He thought he was so clever, using legal loopholes and technicalities to steal everything from me. What he didn't know was that I had been quietly accumulating wealth for years, and I was about to teach him a lesson about family loyalty that he would never forget. 6 months later, when the sheriff knocked on his door with eviction papers, and he realized I now owned his house, the look of absolute terror on his face was worth every penny I had spent. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Robert Mitchell, and at 68 years old I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. I was wrong. The deepest cut came from my own flesh and blood, my younger brother Danny, who was 55 and had always lived in my shadow. Our story begins 40 years ago when our father, Thomas Mitchell, started Mitchell Construction with nothing but a beat-up pickup truck, some basic tools, and an unshakable work ethic that he passed down to both his sons. Dad started the company in 1984, the same year I graduated from trade school with a degree in construction management. Danny was still in high school then, more interested in partying and chasing girls than learning the family trade. But Dad always said there was room for both his boys in the business, and he meant it. When Danny finally graduated barely, Dad welcomed him with open arms, hoping that steady work and responsibility would straighten him out. For 20 years, we worked side by side. I handled the business side contracts, permits, scheduling, customer relations, while Dad supervised the actual construction work. Danny bounced between various roles, never quite settling into any particular specialty, but he was family, so we made it work. He was charming when he wanted to be, good with clients, and when he applied himself, he wasn't a bad worker. The problem was that applying himself was rare, and his charm often covered for laziness and poor judgment. Dad passed away in 2018 at the age of 74. He had been the heart and soul of Mitchell Construction, and his death left a hole that neither Danny nor I could fill alone. But the business had to go on. We had employees depending on us, contracts to fulfill, and a reputation built over 3 decades to maintain. That's when the problems really started. According to Dad's will, which he had updated just 2 years before his death, the business was to be split equally between Danny and me. 50-50 ownership, with both of us listed as co-presidents. It seemed fair on paper, but in practice, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Dad had always been the final decision-maker, the one who could settle disputes between his sons and keep us focused on what mattered, building quality homes and maintaining our family legacy. Without Dad as the buffer, Danny and I clashed constantly. He wanted to take on bigger projects that would bring in more money quickly, even if it meant cutting corners on quality. I insisted on maintaining the standards that had built our reputation, even if it meant smaller profit margins. He wanted to expand rapidly, taking on debt to finance new equipment and larger crews. I preferred steady, sustainable growth that wouldn't put the company at risk. The tension came to a head during a heated argument about a residential development project. Danny had committed us to building 30 houses in 6 months, an impossible timeline that would require sacrificing quality and potentially put us in breach of our other contracts. When I refused to sign off on the deal, he accused me of being a coward, of lacking vision and ambition. "You're just like Dad in his final years," Danny said during what would be our last civil conversation. "Too scared to take risks, too comfortable with mediocrity. This business could be worth millions if you just get out of my way." "This business is worth something because we do good work," I replied. Dad didn't build Mitchell Construction by cutting corners and making promises he couldn't keep. Dad's dead, Robert. His way of doing business died with him. Those words cut deep, and I think Danny knew it, but he wasn't finished. "I've been talking to some lawyers," he continued, a calculating look creeping into his eyes. "There might be ways to restructure the business that would be more efficient, more profitable." I should have paid more attention to that comment, should have asked more questions about these lawyers he was consulting. But I was grieving, exhausted from trying to hold the business together while dealing with my own grief, and frankly, I didn't want to believe that my brother was plotting against me. The first sign of real trouble came 6 months later when I discovered that Danny had been meeting with our biggest client, Harrison Development, without telling me. Harrison was responsible for about 40% of our annual revenue. They hired us for most of their residential projects, and we had worked with them for over 15 years. When I confronted Danny about the secret meetings, he was evasive. "It's just relationship building, Robert. You know how important it is to keep our clients happy." But something felt wrong. Harrison's project manager, Steve Collins, had been avoiding my calls, and when we did speak, he seemed uncomfortable, like he knew something I didn't. The truth came out 3 weeks later in the most humiliating way possible. I was at a construction industry networking event when Steve Collins approached me with an apologetic expression. "Robert, I'm sorry about how this went down," he said, clearly uncomfortable. I tried to push back, but Danny made a compelling case, and the legal documentation seemed legitimate. "What legal documentation?" I asked, a cold dread settling in my stomach. "The partnership dissolution papers." Danny showed us documents proving that he now has controlling interest in Mitchell Construction and that you're being bought out of your partnership. He said you were ready to retire and wanted a clean break. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Steve, I don't know what documents you saw, but I haven't agreed to any dissolution, and I'm certainly not retiring." Steve's face went pale. "Oh God, Robert, what has Danny done?" What Danny had done was execute one of the most elaborate legal schemes I had ever heard of. Over the course of 6 months, he had been working with a lawyer who specialized in partnership disputes. Together, they had found a loophole in our original partnership agreement, a clause that Dad had included about decision-making authority during periods of incapacity or unavailability. The clause was meant to ensure that the business could continue operating if one partner became ill or was otherwise unable to participate in day-to-day operations. It stated that if one partner was unavailable for normal business operations for a period exceeding 90 consecutive days, the other partner could assume temporary decision-making authority and, if necessary, restructure the partnership to ensure business continuity. Danny's lawyer had argued that my emotional unavailability following Dad's death, combined with my resistance to necessary business decisions, and my failure to participate constructively in partnership meetings, constituted unavailability under the terms of the agreement. They had documentation of every argument we'd had, every meeting I'd missed due to other obligations, every time I had disagreed with Danny's proposals. But the real kicker was that Danny had been scheduling partnership meetings at times when he knew I couldn't attend early morning meetings when I was on job sites, evening meetings during family obligations, and then documenting my absences as evidence of my unavailability. His lawyer had crafted a legal argument that portrayed me as an obstructionist partner who was preventing the business from functioning effectively. The paperwork was airtight. Danny now held controlling interest in Mitchell Construction, and I had been relegated to a minority partner with no decision-making authority. Worse, the restructured partnership agreement included a clause that allowed the controlling partner to buy out the minority partner at a predetermined price, a price that was far below the actual value of my share of the business. When I hired my own lawyer to fight the arrangement, I discovered just how thoroughly Danny had outmaneuvered me. Every document was properly filed, every legal requirement had been met, and the restructuring had been approved by the appropriate authorities. My lawyer, Patricia Williams, was blunt in her assessment. "Robert, this is one of the most sophisticated partnership thefts I've ever seen," she said during our initial consultation. "Your brother and his attorney have exploited every loophole in your original agreement. Technically, what they did was legal, even if it was morally reprehensible. So there's nothing I can do. You can challenge it in court, but frankly, I don't think you'll win. The documentation is too thorough, and the legal arguments are sound. Your best option might be to take the buyout and start over." The buyout offer was insulting, $200,000 for my half of a business that was worth at least $2 million. But Danny had structured it so that I had little choice. If I refused the buyout, I would remain a minority partner with no authority, watching him run our father's legacy into the ground while I was powerless to stop him. I took the buyout, but I didn't start over. Instead, I started planning. Danny thought he was so clever, but he had made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was broken, defeated, ready to fade away quietly. He didn't bother to investigate what I had been doing with my money for the past 20 years, or why I was able to live comfortably on what seemed like a modest construction worker's salary. The truth was that I had been investing steadily since my 30s. Nothing flashy or risky, just consistent contributions to index funds, real estate investment trusts, and a few rental properties I had purchased over the years. While Danny was spending his money on new trucks, expensive vacations, and a lifestyle that always seemed to exceed his income, I had been building wealth quietly and methodically. By the time Danny stole the business, my investment portfolio was worth just over $1.8 million. Combined with the $200,000 buyout, I had liquid assets of $2 million money that Danny didn't know existed. I spent the first month after leaving Mitchell Construction in what Danny probably thought was depression and defeat. I stayed home, avoided industry events, and let people assume that losing the family business had broken me. In reality, I was researching, planning, and preparing for the most satisfying revenge I could imagine. Danny had always lived beyond his means, and taking control of the business hadn't changed that. Within 3 months of pushing me out, he had leveraged the company's assets to buy new equipment and take on larger projects. He had also purchased a beautiful $450,000 house in an upscale neighborhood, a symbol of his newfound success and independence. What Danny didn't realize was that his new house was heavily mortgaged. He had put down only 5%, and the monthly payments, combined with his other debts, were stretching his finances thin. More importantly, he had chosen an adjustable-rate mortgage to keep his initial payments low, not thinking about what would happen when the rates reset. I learned all this through careful research and a few strategic conversations with people in the real estate industry. Danny's mortgage was held by First National Bank, and like many banks, they occasionally sold mortgages to investors when they needed to free up capital. It took 4 months of patient negotiation, but I eventually convinced First National to sell me Danny's mortgage. They were happy to do it. I paid slightly above market value, and it helped improve their balance sheet. As far as they were concerned, it was a routine transaction. Danny had no idea what had happened. His mortgage payments still went to the same servicer, the terms hadn't changed, and nothing in his day-to-day life was different. But legally, I now owned his debt, and that gave me options he never saw coming. The first phase of my plan was simply to wait. Danny's adjustable-rate mortgage was scheduled to reset after 18 months, and when it did, his monthly payments would increase substantially. I knew from watching his spending habits that he was already living paycheck to paycheck, despite taking over the business. When his mortgage payment jumped from $2,100 to $3,400 per month, he would be in trouble. But I didn't want to just wait and hope he would default naturally. I wanted to accelerate the process and ensure that he understood exactly who was responsible for his downfall. Phase 2 involved undermining his business systematically. I couldn't compete directly with Mitchell Construction. The non-compete clause in my buyout agreement prevented that. But I could make life difficult for him in other ways. I started by reaching out to our former suppliers and subcontractors. Many of them had worked with our family for decades, and they were uncomfortable with how Danny had treated me. While I couldn't ask them to stop working with Mitchell Construction entirely, I could encourage them to be less flexible with payment terms and less willing to rush orders for Danny's projects. I also began cultivating relationships with potential clients in Danny's target market. I couldn't bid on projects myself, but I could recommend competitors, provide informal consulting on construction costs, and generally make it harder for Danny to win new business. The effect was gradual but noticeable. Danny's projects started running behind schedule when suppliers were slower to deliver materials. His costs increased when subcontractors stopped offering family discounts. His bid success rate dropped when potential clients had access to better information about fair pricing. After 6 months, Danny was struggling. The business was still profitable, but margins were tighter, and cash flow was becoming an issue. When his mortgage payment reset, he was forced to choose between making his house payment and paying his crew on time. He chose to pay his crew, which meant he was 30 days late on his mortgage payment. I was patient. One missed payment wasn't enough to trigger foreclosure proceedings, and I wanted Danny to have time to fully understand his situation. But I also wanted him to know that someone was watching, someone who knew about his financial difficulties. I sent him a letter not as the owner of his mortgage, but as his concerned brother. The letter was perfectly innocent on the surface, just checking in to see how he was doing with the business and offering help if he needed it. But I included just enough specific details about his recent projects and financial challenges to let him know that I was paying attention. Danny's response was predictably hostile. He called me that same evening, furious about what he saw as surveillance and interference. "I know you're behind the problems I've been having," he said without preamble when I answered the phone. "The suppliers, the subcontractors, the clients who suddenly know too much about our business, that's all you, isn't it?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Danny. I've been retired since you bought me out, remember?" "Don't play dumb with me, Robert. I know you're trying to sabotage the business out of spite." "The business isn't mine anymore, Danny. You made sure of that. Why would I care what happens to it now?" "Because you're bitter. Because you can't stand that I was right about the changes we needed to make." I let the silence stretch for a moment before responding. "How are those changes working out for you? I heard you missed your house payment last month." The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line told me I had hit home. "How did you? Who told you that?" "Small town, Danny. People talk. Are you having financial difficulties? Because I meant what I said in my letter. If you need help, I'm still your brother." "I don't need anything from you," he snapped, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Well, the offer stands. Take care of yourself, Danny." I hung up before he could respond, knowing that I had planted the seeds of paranoia and doubt that would make his next few months even more difficult. The second missed mortgage payment came 6 weeks later. Danny had tried to catch up, but a client had been late paying for a completed project, and he had been forced to choose between his mortgage and payroll again. Once again, he chose to pay his crew, which meant he was now 60 days behind on his house payments. This time, I didn't send a letter. Instead, I had my attorney send a formal notice of default on behalf of the mortgage holder. The notice was standard legal language, informing Danny that he was in breach of his mortgage terms and had 30 days to cure the default or face foreclosure proceedings. Danny called me within hours of receiving the notice, and this time his voice was shaking with panic rather than anger. "Robert, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "What's that, Danny?" "Do you know anything about my mortgage, about who owns it now?" I paused as if considering the question carefully. "Your mortgage, I assume it's still with First National Bank. Why?" "Because I got a notice from some law firm I've never heard of, claiming that I'm in default. They're saying the mortgage has been sold to a private investor, but they won't tell me who." "That's strange. Have you been making your payments on time?" Another pause. "I've had some cash flow issues, a couple of late payments, but nothing serious." "Danny, in construction, cash flow problems are always serious. You know that. Dad taught us both that the first rule of business is to pay your debts on time." "I don't need a lecture, Robert. I need to figure out who bought my mortgage and how to work with them." "Well, whoever it is, they're probably just looking to make sure their investment is secure. If you can catch up on your payments, I'm sure they'll work with you." "And if I can't?" "Then you'll lose your house, Danny. That's how mortgages work." The third missed payment was the charm. After 90 days of non-payment, I was legally entitled to begin foreclosure proceedings. But I didn't want to foreclose on the house. I wanted something much more satisfying. Instead, I had my attorney offer Danny a deal. The mysterious mortgage holder was willing to forgive the missed payments and reset the loan terms, but only if Danny agreed to certain conditions. The new mortgage would have a shorter term, higher monthly payments, and most importantly, a clause allowing the mortgage holder to demand full payment at any time with 30 days' notice. Danny was desperate enough to agree. He signed the new mortgage documents without fully understanding what he had committed to, just grateful that he wouldn't lose his house immediately. For 3 months, Danny managed to make the higher payments, though it required him to cut expenses elsewhere. He laid off 2 of his crew members, stopped taking on smaller projects that weren't highly profitable, and began cutting corners on materials and workmanship. That's when I made my final move. I had been monitoring Mitchell Construction's performance and reputation, and the decline was becoming noticeable. Danny's cost-cutting measures were resulting in customer complaints, project delays, and quality issues. 2 clients had threatened to sue over defective work, and word was spreading in the construction community that Mitchell Construction was no longer reliable. Our father's legacy was being destroyed, and that was something I couldn't tolerate. I instructed my attorney to exercise the demand clause in Danny's mortgage. 30 days notice, full payment required, no exceptions. Danny received the notice on a Tuesday morning. By that afternoon, he was at my house, desperate and defeated. "Robert, I need your help," he said when I opened the door. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past few months. His hair was thinner, his face was drawn, and his usual cocky confidence was nowhere to be seen. "What kind of help?" "I got a notice about my mortgage. They want the full balance paid in 30 days or they'll foreclose. It's $397,000. I don't have that kind of money." "That's a tough situation, Danny. Who holds your mortgage now?" "I don't know. Some investment company called Mitchell Holdings LLC. I've never heard of them." I had to work hard to keep a straight face. Mitchell Holdings LLC was a company I had created specifically for this purpose, named after our family and our father's legacy. "Have you tried negotiating with them?" "They won't even take my calls. The attorney just keeps saying that the terms of the mortgage are clear and non-negotiable." What do you want me to do about it? Danny took a shaky breath. I need to borrow money, a lot of money. I know we've had our differences, but you're my brother. You're the only family I have left. How much money? 400,000. Maybe a little less if I can negotiate a payoff amount. I pretended to consider this carefully. Danny, that's a huge amount of money. What could you offer as collateral? The business. Mitchell Construction is worth at least $2 million now. I could give you a lien on the company assets. The same business you stole from me, using legal loopholes and technicalities. Danny's face flushed, but he was too desperate to get defensive. That was business, Robert. This is family. Business and family got mixed up once before, and it didn't work out well for me. I'm begging you. If I lose the house, I lose everything. My credit will be destroyed, and without good credit, I can't maintain the business lines of credit. I let him sweat for a full minute before responding. Let me make some calls, see what I can do. Of course, the calls I made were to my own attorney, instructing him to prepare foreclosure documents and to research the process for evicting someone from a foreclosed property. 3 days later, I called Danny back. I'm sorry, Danny, but I can't help you. 400,000 is more than I have liquid, and frankly, given our history, I'm not comfortable taking that kind of risk. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Danny, are you there? You could help me if you wanted to, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You just don't want to. Maybe that's true. Maybe I learned something about family loyalty from watching how you treated me. So this is revenge. This is consequences, Danny. You taught me that business and family don't mix. You were right. The foreclosure proceedings moved quickly after that. Danny tried to find alternative financing, but his credit was shot and the timeline was too short. He contacted several lenders, but nobody was willing to approve a loan large enough to pay off his mortgage on such short notice. 2 weeks before the foreclosure sale, Danny figured out who was behind Mitchell Holdings LLC. He showed up at my house at 7 in the morning, pounding on my door with both fists. I know it's you. He shouted when I opened the door. Mitchell Holdings, you son of a bitch, I know it's you. Good morning, Danny. You're up early. You bought my mortgage. You've been planning this whole thing. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I hired a private investigator. Mitchell Holdings LLC is registered to your attorney's office. You own my house. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Lower your voice, Danny. The neighbors don't need to hear this. I don't give a damn about your neighbors. You manipulated me into default and then bought my debt so you could steal my house. I didn't steal anything, Danny. I bought a mortgage from a bank and you defaulted on your payments. Everything I did was perfectly legal. Legal but wrong. This is my home. It was your home when you were making the payments. Now it's just a house that belongs to the bank, well, to me, actually. Danny stared at me for a long moment and I could see him processing the full scope of what I had done. The business problems, the suppliers being difficult, the clients who knew too much about our costs. That was all you, wasn't it? I made some phone calls, shared some industry knowledge. Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. You destroyed my business to force me into default on my house. I simply made sure that people in our industry knew what kind of businessman you had become. The rest was just market forces. Market forces, Danny repeated, his voice hollow. You ruined me over a business dispute. I didn't ruin you, Danny. You ruined yourself when you decided that stealing from your brother was an acceptable way to get ahead. I didn't steal from you. Everything I did was legal. Yes, it was. Just like everything I did was legal. You taught me that legal and moral aren't the same thing. The foreclosure sale was held on the courthouse steps on a cold February morning. I was the only bidder, not surprising, since I had made sure the sale was advertised with minimal notice and at an inconvenient time. I purchased Danny's house for $385,000, slightly less than what he owed on the mortgage. Danny had 30 days to vacate the property. He spent those 30 days trying to convince me to change my mind, to show mercy, to remember that we were family. He offered to sign over his shares in Mitchell Construction, to work for me as an employee, to do whatever it took to keep his house. I listened to his pleas with the same expression I imagine he had worn when he was signing the documents that stole my share of our father's business. On move-out day, Danny was still there when the sheriff arrived with the eviction notice. I accompanied them, both to ensure the process went smoothly and to see the look on my brother's face when he realized that this was really happening. "Mr. Daniel Mitchell," the sheriff said, reading from the official document, "you are hereby ordered to vacate these premises immediately. Failure to comply will result in arrest for trespassing." Danny looked at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. 43 years, he said. 43 years we've been brothers, and this is how it ends. It ended when you decided to steal from me, Danny. This is just the cleanup. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Danny loaded his belongings into a rental truck with the help of a couple of friends. Most of his furniture wouldn't fit, so he had to leave behind the expensive dining room set and the leather sectional sofa that had been symbols of his success. As he was loading the last of his boxes, he turned to me one final time. "Was it worth it, Robert, destroying your only brother for revenge? You destroyed our relationship when you stole our father's business. I just returned the favor. And what happens to Mitchell Construction now? With me gone, who's going to run it?" That was a question I had been thinking about for months. I hear that businesses in financial distress can sometimes be purchased very cheaply by motivated buyers. Danny's eyes widened as he understood the implication. "You're going to steal my business now, too." "I'm going to buy it, Danny, just like you bought me out. Except when I do it, I'll be paying fair market value for a distressed company instead of using legal loopholes to cheat my partner." Without his house payments and with his credit destroyed, Danny couldn't maintain the lines of credit that Mitchell Construction needed to operate. Within 6 months, he was forced to put the business up for sale to pay his debts. I bought Mitchell Construction for $1.2 million, exactly what it was worth given its damaged reputation and outstanding obligations. Danny cleared about $300,000 after paying off the business debts and legal fees. The first thing I did after requiring the family business was change the name back to what it had been before Danny's ownership, Thomas Mitchell and Sons Construction, in honor of our father. The second thing I did was implement the quality standards and business practices that had made our family company successful for 3 decades. It took time to rebuild relationships with suppliers and clients, but within a year, we were back to being known as one of the most reliable construction companies in the region. Danny left town 6 months after losing his house. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he found work with a construction company in Arizona, starting over as a project supervisor at a fraction of the salary he had been earning as owner of Mitchell Construction. He never contacted me again, and I never tried to reach out to him. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. 3 years later, I'm still running Thomas Mitchell and Sons Construction. At 71, I could retire comfortably, but I'm not ready yet. There's something satisfying about going to work every day in the business my father built, knowing that his legacy is secure and that his standards are being maintained. I've thought a lot about what Danny said on his last day in the house, whether destroying my brother was worth it. The answer isn't simple. I didn't set out to destroy Danny. I set out to get justice for what he had done to me and to our father's business. But Danny's downfall was ultimately his own creation. He chose to steal from his brother. He chose to live beyond his means. He chose to compromise the quality and reputation that our father had spent 30 years building. All I did was ensure that choices have consequences. The house Danny lost is now rented to a nice family who appreciate living in a well-maintained neighborhood. The rental income covers the mortgage and provides a steady return on my investment. Sometimes I drive by just to see how they're taking care of the place, and I'm satisfied that it's being treated with more respect than Danny ever showed it. Mitchell Construction employs 12 people now, including 2 of Danny's former crew members who asked for their jobs back after he left town. They're grateful for the steady work and the return to quality standards, and they never ask about Danny or what happened between us. The business is profitable again, our reputation is restored, and our clients know they can count on us to deliver quality work on time and on budget. Dad would be proud of what we've rebuilt, even if he might have questions about the methods I used to get here. Sometimes late at night, when I'm alone in the house I've lived in for 30 years, I wonder what might have happened if Danny had just been honest about his financial problems. If he had come to me as a brother instead of scheming to steal the business. If he had been willing to work together instead of trying to push me out. But those are questions that will never have answers. Danny made his choices and I made mine. He taught me that family loyalty was just another business transaction, so I treated him accordingly. The last I heard, Danny was still working construction in Arizona, living in a small apartment and driving a beat-up pickup truck. He's probably telling people that his brother cheated him out of the family business, painting himself as the victim of a cruel scheme. Maybe that's how he needs to remember it to sleep at night. But I know the truth, and more importantly, I know that justice was served. Danny learned what it feels like to lose everything to someone who uses legal loopholes and technicalities to take what doesn't belong to them. The difference is that everything I took from Danny, the house, the business, the financial security had belonged to me first. I was simply reclaiming what was rightfully mine and teaching my brother that actions have consequences. If that makes me the villain in Danny's version of this story, I can live with that. Sometimes being the bad guy is worth it when you're fighting for what's right. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.